push him, because I took it as a sign of disrespect that they didn't double me. That's why I bounced and looked back and I was like, oh, you still not coming? Classification means you have the highest classification. I have the highest classification of winning championships. I have 4. There's nobody that's won more than me that's around. Say Tim Duncan, but Tim Duncan.
Anthony Edwards said, what about Larry Bird? Shaq Magic and the NBA's respect problem. Anthony Edwards looked straight into the camera, no hesitation, no filter, and said Michael Jordan was the only one that really had skill. Not in a locker room, not in a private conversation that got leaked, in a recorded interview with a microphone, published, available for the entire basketball world to hear, and the basketball world heard it. Within hours, Shaquille O'Neal, Magic Johnson, and Isaiah Thomas had all responded publicly, directly, and without any diplomatic softening. But here's where this story gets genuinely interesting, because Shaq didn't just push back on Edwards. He said something that nobody expected. He admitted that the state of today's NBA, the softness, the three-point dependency, the loss of physical interior play, is partly his own fault. The most dominant big man in NBA history pointed the finger at himself. That is not a headline you see every day. So let's go through all of it, the quote, the responses, the history, the context, and the real conversation that sits underneath all of this noise. We are closing in on 1,500 subscribers here at Hoop Action TV, and if you have been watching this channel, you already know we do not do surface-level takes. We go deep. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. We are almost at the milestone, and every single subscriber counts. Drop a like, leave a comment, share this video with someone who actually watches basketball and has an opinion about it. This is exactly the kind of conversation that needs more voices in it. Anthony Edwards was being interviewed by the Wall Street Journal when the topic shifted to era comparisons, his generation versus the generations that built the NBA into what it is today. Edwards gave his honest assessment. Michael Jordan was the only player from past eras who, in his view, truly had skill at a level he recognized and respected. That quote taken on its own is already enough to start a debate, but the context around it makes it more complicated. Edwards was born in 2001. The NBA he grew up watching was already deep into the analytics era, already shaped by the Golden State Warriors championship runs, already operating in a world where Stephen Curry had permanently changed how the game was played. He did not grow up watching grainy footage of Larry Bird reading a defense from the elbow, or Magic Johnson running the fast break at 6'9". And critically, when Edwards played his one college season at Georgia, the 2020 NCAA tournament was canceled because of COVID-19. He went from college straight to the NBA without ever playing in March Madness, without the moment that for many players forces you to absorb basketball history because you are living inside it. None of that is an excuse for what he said, but it is context. There's also a layered contradiction inside Edwards' worldview that is worth naming directly. He has previously stated on the record, "Could Jordan guard me? Hell nah." And in the same breath, he calls Jordan the greatest of all time. So if Jordan is the GOAT and Jordan played alongside Bird, Magic, Kareem, and Isaiah Thomas for years, what exactly does it mean to say those players had no skill? You cannot crown the king and trash his entire kingdom in the same sentence. Social media did not miss it. Hoop Central posted on X, Anthony Edwards saying Larry Bird had no skill has NBA fans divided all over social media. Divided is probably the charitable word for it. Larry Bird won 3 consecutive NBA MVP awards, 1984, 1985, and 1986. 3 straight, in a league that also contained Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Isaiah Thomas, and Julius Erving. These were not weak fields. These were the best basketball players on earth at the time, and Bird won the award 3 years running. But statistics only tell part of the story. What Bird actually was something that does not fit neatly into a box. The three-point contest, the first one 1986 All-Star Weekend, Bird walked into the locker room before the competition started, looked every other competitor directly in the eye and said, "Which one of you is going to come in second place?" Nobody responded, not one player pushed back, not a single word came from the room. And then Bird won the contest. He did not need to trash talk after the fact because the result was already decided before the first shot went up. There's another story that circulates among players and coaches from that era. Bird, during a game, told a defender exactly when and where he was going to shoot. The defender closed out hard, sprinted to contest the shot, did everything right, and Bird drained it anyway. Clean, all net. He then turned to the defender and said one word. Legend, no celebration, no pointing, no stare down, just said the word and walked back up the court. That is not the behavior of a player without skill. That is the behavior of a player so certain in his own ability that the outcome of the possession is not a question in his mind before it happens. Isaiah Thomas responded to Edwards directly on social media. Larry Bird had no skill. Stop it. Bird was one of the toughest and smartest players the NBA has ever seen. Magic Johnson followed. Anthony Edwards should have done his homework before talking about the legends. And beyond the individual quotes, there's a physical reality about Bird that rarely gets mentioned in these era debates. Bird's back deteriorated to the point that it ended his career prematurely. He played through injuries that, by the standards of modern sports medicine, would have had him on the surgical table and into rehabilitation long before they reached the severity they did. He dove for loose balls. He hit the floor every single night. The Physicality of the 1980s NBA was not a marketing exaggeration. Hand-checking was legal, contact in the lane was expected, and the officials allowed the kind of defense that would draw a flagrant foul review in today's game. Bird operated in that environment and still shot 40% from 3, still read defenses better than almost anyone who has ever played the position, still coordinated 5 players in motion with the precision of a point guard despite playing small forward. The man told you the shot was coming, told you when, told you where, and still buried it. That is not a lack of skill, that is a cheat code. At a public event in Los Angeles with Stephen A. Smith asking the questions, Magic Johnson was given the opportunity to respond to Edwards' comments. He did not argue the basketball. He did not pull out statistics or reference specific plays. He said, "I never respond to a guy that's never won a championship." The room reacted. That line hit the way it was designed to hit, not as an analytical rebuttal, but as a dismissal. Magic was not engaging with Edwards as a peer. He was declining to engage at all. Now there is a factual wrinkle worth addressing here. Edwards has not won an NBA championship. But he did win a high school state championship, and more significantly, he won a 2024 Paris Olympics gold medal with Team USA. Magic probably knew this. The line was not really about championships anyway. It was about standing, about earned credibility, about the difference between someone who has been measured against the absolute best and someone who is still in the middle of that process. Magic didn't argue the point. He questioned the source. And that is, arguably, the coldest response possible. The era debate has continued to generate opinions from respected voices. NBA analyst Jason Williams argued that Magic would struggle in today's game because of shooting gaps. He drew the comparison to Ben Simmons, a legitimate facilitator who was essentially unplayable in modern playoff basketball because defenses could simply sag off him. But Reggie Miller fired back with a very different perspective. Larry Bird could play in any era, generation, and dominate. Larry Bird would dominate in today's game, and he gets to shoot 15 to 23s. Are you kidding me? Miller's point is mathematically grounded. Bird shot 40% from 3 in an era where the three-point line was still relatively new, where teams were not primarily designed around perimeter spacing, and where the volume of three-point attempts league-wide was a fraction of what it is today. Bird in a modern offense with modern spacing, the rules that now protect shooters from contact, and the argument that he would struggle requires ignoring what the actual numbers say. There's also the sports medicine component. Bird's back problems in 2026 with current surgical technology and injury management would have been addressed years earlier. Conservative estimates suggest he plays 4 to 5 more seasons at a high level with modern medical care. The career we saw was already short. Shaquille O'Neal has a specific kind of authority in this conversation that is worth establishing before getting into what he said. He grew up watching Dr. J. He played alongside Kobe Bryant during 3 consecutive championship runs. He faced Michael Jordan on the court, and has publicly stated that Jordan was the only opponent who ever made him genuinely nervous. He won 4 NBA championships and was named Finals MVP 3 times. He is not a commentator who watched the game from the outside. He is someone who is inside the machine at the highest level it has ever operated. When Edwards' comments circulated, Shaq's response was direct. "I know what greatness looks like. You want me to see it now and call it greatness? I can't." When people pushed back and called him a hater, he responded with a line that is logically airtight. "You ain't great and I'm great. How can I hate on you? That don't make no sense." Think about that for a second. Hate, as a concept, implies jealousy, wanting something someone else has. Shaq's position is that he has already achieved at a level that makes jealousy structurally impossible. That is not arrogance for its own sake. That is a factual accounting of where he sits in NBA history relative to where Edwards currently sits. On social media, Shaq posted, "You can't call yourself great if you don't respect the players who built the game before you." When asked which current players he does respect, Shaq was specific and brief. He said he could count them on one hand. Joker could play, Giannis could play, Dame, a couple of these guys. Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, a couple of others unnamed. That is Shaq's entire list of current NBA players he considers operating at a level he recognizes as genuine greatness. Everyone else on the roster of 450 professional basketball players did not make the cut. And Shaq used a specific phrase that landed hard. That's flagrantly disrespectful to the old guard. He was not speaking abstractly. He was speaking personally, as someone who is part of that old guard, someone who watched Bird and Magic and Isaiah and Kareem and then went out and competed at that same level and now watches the current product and sees something categorically different. 4 rings, 3 finals MVPs. And he said today's game does not impress him. That is not bitterness. That is a standard most people cannot even see from where they are standing. This is the part of the story that nobody saw coming. In the middle of criticizing the current state of the NBA, the three-point dependency, the loss of interior play, what he called the softness of the modern game, Shaq turned the lens on himself, and what he said was genuinely surprising. He explained that his dominance in the post was so complete, so overwhelming, that NBA teams were left with no viable counter strategy inside the paint. No center could match him. No defensive scheme could reliably slow him down. So the league was forced to adapt, and the adaptation was to build stretch bigs, big men who live on the perimeter, who shoot threes, who spread the floor, who do everything except what Shaq did, because nobody could do what Shaq did. His exact words, "It's my fault that guys are playing soft, what I call it." Walk through the chain reaction that statement describes. Shaq's post-dominance forced teams to develop big men who could operate outside. That perimeter-oriented big man philosophy eventually contributed to the conditions that made the Golden State Warriors dynasty possible. A team built on spacing, ball movement, and three-point shooting at a volume and accuracy the league had never seen before. Golden State won. Everybody watched, and then every franchise in the NBA spent the next decade trying to build their own version of that system. The result, as Shaq sees it, it's like watching the same play on loop. He went further. On Steph Curry's influence, he said, "Steph Curry and those guys mess it up. Every team's not a three-point shooting team, so why does everybody have the same strategy?" This is an observation grounded in NBA history. The Showtime Lakers ran a specific system built around Magic's passing and speed. The Utah Jazz built everything around the Stockton to Malone pick and roll. The Bad Boy Pistons built their identity around physical defense and interior toughness. Each of these teams had a DNA that was distinctly theirs, a system that came from the personnel they had, not from copying what the best team in the league was doing. Today, the system is largely uniform: three-point volume, pace, spacing. The teams that deviate from this formula are outliers, not a sign of genuine strategic diversity across the league. In Shaq's most striking line in this whole section, "The game has already been perfect ever since Naismith created it. We as humans messed it up." He is not entirely comfortable with the direction the league took, but he is honest enough to acknowledge his own role in triggering it. He dislikes big men standing at the three-point line. He finds it aesthetically wrong, structurally misaligned with what the position was built to do. And then he admits that if he played today, he would have to adapt. He would have to develop a perimeter game. He would have to be part of the thing he critiques because the rules of the environment would demand it. The most dominant big man in NBA history just said the modern game exists in part because nobody could stop him. That is either the most arrogant thing ever said or the most accurate. Consider prime Shaquille O'Neal dropped into the 2026 NBA. Not an older, slower version, prime Shaq at his physical peak with his combination of size, speed, and force. The question of who stops him is not rhetorical, it is genuinely difficult to answer. Hakeem Olajuwon, one of the greatest defensive centers in NBA history, a player with footwork and technique that was almost unmatched, could not fully contain Shaq. David Robinson, another Hall of Fame center with extraordinary athleticism, had no reliable answer for him. Patrick Ewing was a problem for almost everyone he faced, and Shaq ate his lunch on a regular basis. These are all-time great defenders. These are players who would be considered elite by any standard in any era. Now look at the center position in today's NBA. The majority of centers are positioned at or near the three-point line as part of the offensive scheme. The muscle memory for post-defense, the footwork, the positioning, the physicality required to front or dig down on a dominant interior player, has not been the primary focus of big man development for years because the offensive system does not demand it. Shaq's own assessment of what he would do in the modern game: "I will make all of them quit, and they know it. On 7-footers who live at the three-point line, they don't want that funk." A conservative analytical estimate, based on how he performed against the best defenders of his actual era, is 40 points and 15 rebounds per game. Conservative analytics departments across the league would be restructuring their defensive schemes within the first 2 weeks of the season. You know, a player is different when even the people who beat him are legends. Every significant defeat in Shaq's career came against elite players operating at an extraordinary level. Hakeem's dream shake in 1995 is one of the few genuine answers anyone found. Kobe in 2004 is complicated by factors well beyond Shaq's individual performance. The losses are not the story of a player who could be contained, they are the story of a player who needed legendary opposition to be slowed down. Anthony Edwards is not alone in this. What he said reflects something broader, a pattern in how the newest generation of NBA players relates to the history of the game they're playing. There is a useful flip test here. Imagine Larry Bird or Michael Jordan casually saying, without having watched modern NBA basketball, that today's players have no skill. Imagine that quote going public. The reaction would be immediate, sustained, and overwhelming. It would dominate sports media for a week. There would be video essays, podcast episodes, and think pieces analyzing every dimension of the disrespect. When Edwards makes the same statement in the other direction, the response is significant but ultimately shorter-lived. That asymmetry is worth noticing. Isaiah Thomas posted on social media, "Propaganda works, so be careful what you choose to believe." The implication is that the narrative around older players, that they were slower, less athletic, operating in a weaker competitive environment, has been repeated often enough that it gets accepted as fact, even without the work of actually watching the film. The basketball IQ argument is where the history gets most interesting. Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic are two of the most celebrated players in the current NBA, and a significant part of what makes them elite is precisely what made Bird elite. Elite passing, positional awareness, the ability to read a defense and exploit it with coordination and timing rather than raw athleticism alone. The skills that Edwards implied didn't exist in the 1980s are the skills that the league is currently celebrating as signs of genius. Reggie Miller's point about modern rules is directly relevant. Fewer hand checks means more open driving lanes. More open spacing means more clean looks. A player who shot 40% from 3 in the most physically restrictive defensive environment of the modern era, at a time when three-point volume was a fraction of what it is today, shooting 15 to 20 threes per game in a system built for it. The math on that does not support the idea that Bird would struggle to adapt. The respect deficit is not just about one quote from one player. It is about a generation that has access to more basketball footage than any previous generation, and is watching less of the history than any previous generation. The archive exists. The film is available. The choice to engage with it or not is entirely voluntary. You cannot understand where the game is going if you do not know where it came from. That is not nostalgia. That is how knowledge works. Larry Bird was asked directly about era comparisons, about whether players from his time could compete with players today and whether players today could have competed in his era. His response: every decade's different, the game changes, you cannot compare. No anger, no social media post, no clapping back at a 23-year-old who dismissed him without watching him play. No press conference, no interview appearance specifically designed to defend his legacy. Bird said his piece and moved on. The man who told defenders exactly when and where the shot was coming, the man whose psychological edge over opponents was so complete that he could narrate the outcome of a possession before it happened, is not scrambling to prove anything to anyone. He does not need to. The record is the record: 3 MVPs, 3 championships, 5 finals appearances, Hall of Fame. A career that was cut short by physical deterioration that modern medicine would have prevented, and still produced enough to place him on the short list of greatest players who ever lived. The most skilled response to being called unskilled, not caring enough to argue. Pull back from the individual quotes and the back and forth on social media, and what you find is a conversation that is genuinely worth having. Not about whether old players were better than new players or new players better than old, but about what happens when a generation stops studying the game. Michael Jordan studied the players who came before him. He watched Dr. J, he watched Jerry West. He absorbed what they had built and then built on top of it. Kobe Bryant studied Jordan with the same intensity. He has spoken publicly about watching Jordan's footage obsessively, breaking down his footwork, his angles, his decision-making under pressure. The process of studying history is not nostalgia. It is competitive intelligence. It is how the ceiling gets raised. The players who have always pushed the game forward are the players who understood what the game already was before they arrived. They respected the foundation not because they were required to, but because they recognized that the foundation was load-bearing. Skill looks different every era. Greatness doesn't. Now here's what this conversation actually calls for from you. The next time a highlight reel from the 1980s or 1990s shows up in your feed, actually watch it, not as a history lesson. Watch it as basketball. Watch Bird read the defense before the ball even leaves him under his hands. Watch Magic push the pace and find the open man before the defense has finished rotating. Watch what the game looked like when the interior was the primary battleground and every inch of paint was contested. And then come back here and tell us, was Anthony Edwards out of line, or is this just the new generation speaking their truth? Was Shaq being honest or being bitter? And does the modern NBA look like an evolution of what came before, or something that has genuinely drifted from its roots? Drop your take in the comments. This is a conversation where the specifics matter: which player, which era, which argument, so bring your actual opinion and let's hear it. Share this video with someone who watches basketball and will disagree with you. The best comments on this channel are the ones that are actually argued. We are at 1,500 subscribers and climbing. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Every person in this community makes the conversation better. If you enjoy real NBA breakdowns like this, you'll like what's coming next.